I'm Mr. Vinod Chopra, and I came to UK when I was 6. I've grown up in UK, in Southampton most of my life, and I live in Southampton now, and I'm 65 years old. Early life, as much as I can remember, is I was 6 years old when I came here, but I was actually born in Delhi. My grandfather was station master of Delhi railway station, so we had a fairly good income, middle class family, whatever you like to call it. And I don't remember much more about Delhi. And then when he retired, we moved to a town in Punjab called Jalandhar. I can remember the old house and our streets and the smells and everything. Yeah, and there I went to what they called an English media school. So I started learning. You start school about 4 there. Very similar here to preschool, and then you start learning either in English or in Hindi. And I started learning in English, and I had a few words of English, obviously, by the time I'm 6. And my father had originally gone from India to East Africa, a place called Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and from there he'd gone to UK because his cousin was in Southampton, and he'd come here. So he was away for a couple of years during the time I was growing up, and it was really just a normal, average sort of childhood, I suppose, learning and pleasurable life, playing, very, very secure. Really, you could run around the streets there, you could do anything. And it was very different from UK. You suddenly cut in one place and you're placed into another place, which is totally different atmosphere, totally different way of doing things. And we arrived in UK. We were picked up. It was a very, very long drive back to Southampton from there. At that time, there was no motorway. Obviously, it's just the smaller roads. I think 3-4 hour drive just to get to Southampton, and then you're put into a place here that the streets are very much different. There's not the sounds or anything else. There's no one sitting outside talking to each other. Everybody's in their own houses. My father was renting a place at that time from a guy called Mr. Khan, who'd been in here a little bit longer. He's a very good friend of my father's. And in those days, literally, there were about 6 or 7 families within Portswood area where we had moved, and then there was a community further down in the sort of St Mary's area. Very, very small community, very much a very combined community, very much together in the sense that there wasn't any discrimination between, like, oh, he's from Pakistan or he's from Africa or he's this. There was nothing. It was just a group of families, and that was it. And we all got onto it with each other. And growing up, that's how it was. I mean, even with some of the families that were here, the Pakistani families from Punjab were very much like us. We would go around to the house. We were running around the street or wherever here, and we would meet up. There was some friends. And it's only when I started school here in Southampton, things became a little bit, well, very much more difficult and very much different. I went to a school called St Denis, and that was just a Church of England school. When we first started, the school was fine, the teachers very helpful, very good. And obviously my English that I've learnt from India and English here growing up, kids would be different. So I had to have some extra, work to try and get my English up to speed and everything. But the worst thing of it was that besides me, there was only one other person in the whole school that was Asian, and that was it. And unfortunately, I suffered a lot of bullying and racism at that time from the kids. And going through St Denis School wasn't really fun. It was okay. You learnt of it. Going on from that, we went to quite a mediocre school in Southampton at that time. It's called Hampton Park, which has since been closed. There, when we first went there, the bullying and everything got worse because you had several schools combined, obviously. And it wasn't until we sort of made some friends and got our own group together, and then in those days there was a lot of fights and stuff in the playground and stuff as well. Once we had sorted a few people out, things got a little bit better, and that was sort of secondary school. I know it sounds very much. I know even nowadays some kids will be facing that in certain areas, and you gotta trust that you have your own friends and you can get your own group together and you can do what you're there for is a bit of study, because otherwise just distraction. And that secondary school time was really wasted because we were distracted with, there was more concern about what's going to happen next playtime than there was about studying. And when I left secondary school, it was just a couple of what they used to call CSEs, and that was it. Didn't really have that good an education. The racism we faced, I mean, in secondary school, even the teachers would call you monkey or you're nignog, or they would actually refer to you like that. Even some of the teachers. The kids, obviously, the name calling, whatever, and so on. And really, it didn't sort out until we had a couple of guys from Pakistan who were a little bit stronger as well. And they started to join the school, and then some more people came in. As the sort of Asians grew within Southampton, more people were attending in schools. It's not everybody was like that. I mean, I still have friends from that era and that time, and I still know people from my secondary school, which I get on with fine. We've grown up. I have friends that are grown up with me, but the distractors were so distracting that it really made life difficult, and it was uncomfortable in the sense that you didn't have that relaxed atmosphere to be able to study. And the teachers didn't do a lot about it at that time because they were very similar upbringing, I suppose, where the British Empire had been around the world and the teachers had that sort of attitude to it, And we couldn't really argue back because we didn't know enough to give them the argument. It's only later on in life when you learn things and you can tell them, you're being a silly whatever. What are you talking about? Those days, you remember, kids don't have answers, and even nowadays, I'm sure it goes on, and then people will tell you this in your school. When a teacher says it, you think, God, it must be true, and then you don't realise what the truth is until you grow up a bit. So that era was okay, but it was something we went through, sort of thing. It wasn't the most pleasant time. But as far as family was concerned, as far as the community was concerned, it was very sheltered, very lovely community. We had friends. There was a limited number of families here anyway. By late 60s, early 70s, they'd grown a lot more. And we then had people meeting and trying to set up sort of communities and so on. Around 71, when I went to secondary school, it was that time that we formed a thing called the Vedic Society of Southampton, which is now the Temple Authority, if you like. I can remember the senior people in the town. I mean, it's thanks to some of those senior people that we have a community in this way. Some of them were like Rishi's granddad, Mr. Dasram Sunak, my dad, Mr. Chopra, and there was Mr. Balla, Mr. Pandey, Mr. Sani, and all these, Mr. Kalia, he moved to Canada. All these people were involved in setting up the physical side of setting up a society and trying to get a community working. So it was like two worlds, there was our own home world and there was a school world. So the home world was very nurturing, very good. And once the society had been set up, I think one of your previous ones, Naresh, was saying, we got a place from the Education Authority and there were meetings every Sunday and so on. My dad was one of the very active members. He did know English, obviously, very well, and he had been negotiating with the council. We knew a lot of the councillors at that time, which we got to know personally, and those councillors then made it possible for the Visiting Society to be able to get the land that we got. The land where the temple is built was originally, what do they call it, allotments at one side, and a dump area on one top end where people would just literally dump rubbish, but most of it was allotments, and council was closing down all those allotments. They closed more than 2/3 of it. There's still 1/3 there. And the idea originally was to build a temple with a community centre so that it would have a lot more with it. But as time went on, more money was raised and the committees changed. They wanted a temple more than they wanted the community centre, and it became a temple, and that's been there ever since, obviously. It wasn't a conflict as such. I mean, it became two lives. There was a British life and an Indian life, if you like. I know it's very hard to explain, but when I'm out with my friends and everything else, my English is good because I've grown up here or whatever. I mixed with them, and that was the British side of it. When we went out, we had girlfriends, we went to pubs, whatever. When we were at home, it was an Indian culture. We celebrated the religious festivals, we did whatever, and it's almost like the twain didn't meet, the two didn't mix. You didn't come and tell your parents, sorry, I'm going out to the pub today, yeah, or anything like that. And there were two parallel lives in a way. And you lived that until a long way through, until I got married, I suppose. And my kids obviously are different from that because they've grown up in this country, and it's slightly, things have changed a lot. Obviously, my parents, coming from India, had their own cultural divides from there. And even nowadays, throughout Britain, you find there's 2 or 3 different ways that people go. They either go into a little ghetto in a community, and then everything becomes Indian, Pakistani, whatever. And then there's others that will go totally British. I think the slang term is coconut, but they go totally British and they don't want to know about the Indian culture. And then there's this parallel life between. There's people between, and I'm one of those that were between, and to a certain extent still am, because we celebrate our religious festival, we teach our kids everything, and yet they still have a British life. They still go out, they go on holidays, they do whatever. So it's two parallel lives in a way, and that's always been like that. I would say I'm 1.5 in a way, because my dad came in. The sacrifices that my dad made weren't anything like we made. I mean, Dad, he came here, the first house he bought, luckily he had a very decent job. He was a machine operator, and they had a fairly good job and fairly good income. And I would say in middle class sort of British family, within the Asian culture, there's always to buy your own house, however you do it. Whereas I think in English culture, people tend to move away from the house and then rent and then buy a house later on or whatever. But in Indian culture, you want to buy your own house and be independent and be financially secure. So Dad was in that way, So as soon as my sister was born, first thing he did was buy a house. Had enough saved up for the deposit and so on, but we actually bought quite a bigger house, a 4-bedroom, which could be separated off, and he could let upstairs, and downstairs was all ours. And this is a very common thing within the Indian families those days, because it would mean an extra income, so you could afford the house to start with. And as the family grew, then you had a bigger house or whatever, or you could buy a bigger house for yourself. So yeah, we've always had a nice house, we've always had heating, there was no sort of problems like that. Grew up in a comfortable life, I wouldn't say a rich life, whereas my kids now have grown up in a much, much better life, because my elder one, he went to King Edward's, which is obviously public school, and the younger one, he didn't want to go to public school. He was happier going to the local school, and he said, I'm going there and that's it. But then he's done well as well. He's my older one's a banker, and the younger one is a data scientist. He did a PhD in particle physics. And luckily, after college, when I left college, I did work with the college and uni, and I've got about 3 different degrees. So it's thing that was drummed into us, education. Try and get education, and that one thing that you can always depend on when you're educated, you can have a decent life or a decent job. I think that makes a big difference, because a lot of the immigrants that did come here weren't brilliantly educated, and they had to do the menial jobs. I mean, it's like the West Indies immigration and a lot of the East African immigration. They were taking on the lower jobs, if you like. And in a way, okay, they still saved money and they still did those jobs. And things are changing all the time. I mean, that's happening now with new minorities coming in and other minorities going up the scale, if you like. It's still happening all the time. People tend to see things as if never happened before. It's something new, but it's a cycle. It does tend to happen. And as you get older, you see that within the society. It's happened before as well, same thing. There are obviously differences. I mean, there are differences now, and society changing a lot. But I think one of the reasons for parents coming to Britain and us staying in Britain was that it was seen as a fair society, and it didn't matter what religion you were, it didn't matter what you wanted. You had free speech, you could vote, you could work, you could do whatever you wanted. Trouble comes when people start to get a bit of a woke society where you can't say what you want, where you can't do things. I'm obviously very much more conservative as I got older. The older you get, the more sort of conservative you get in a way. With some of the families, I mean, like the Sunak family, we've been very close. I mean, I've known Rishi since the day he came home in his pants, and so we've grown up together, and I know the family, and a lot of the families that have been here originally, we still see them and know them. Not all of them have made Prime Minister, but the kids have grown up all in very good jobs, all in very, very good positions, surgeons, scientists, and so on. So they're all doing very well in that sort of sense, as a typical sort of middle-class families. British culture, what I like about it is that growing up here, you get this concept of British culture. It's very hard for some outsiders to understand, but it's this sense of fair play, sense of being here, sense of community, sense of being able to do things, which is fair, and you think it's fair to others as well. A lot of countries, and a lot of countries are going up fast. Even in America, it's a me culture. It used to be a very much a community culture in Britain. It's becoming a me culture now, I think, in that people are more interested in what can I do for myself rather than what can I do for the community. I mean, a lot of the great institutions within Britain have always been because of people giving and people making that culture. And growing up, even from sort of secondary school onwards, we used to go to football matches, we'd go to the cricket ground, we'd mix up. There was racism, but then we found there were people, for example, Hampshire Cricket Ground, we went there and we had people saying, what are you doing letting them in? And the manager there, Mike, who used to be the manager there, he said, look, you don't like it, you go out, I'm having these guys here. And that was it. They shut them up. And that sense of fairness and the fair play sort of thing comes in. And I think I've grown up like that in that way. I don't try and judge people by colour or religion or whatever. I think it's, what are they like? Are they being fair on someone? Are they doing the right thing? Has to be, I think that has to be the right thing. You do the right thing. That's the British culture, I think. I think you've got to be able to take things they come and try. Like as I said, once I left college, originally I was doing a degree, and then even when you apply for, I applied for 60, 70 jobs and there was nothing. And then I applied for one job within Southampton University, and I did a project work with them, with a research team. And that was involving researching very low frequencies, particles coming off the sun. and they wanted someone to build some electronic equipment for them, and obviously being at that time I'd done electronics, and I built. The U.S. Navy had given us some missiles to launch, and they were doing research into particles coming off the sun and affecting the Earth's atmosphere in the where the frequency affects it. The very low frequencies stretched out, and they would, when you have the aurora borealis, this is what happens when it ionizes from the particles of the sun. It ionizes the gases in the atmosphere. But we wanted to see that, so we wanted to spray barium into the ionosphere. So barium ionizes red. We made the payloads up for it, and I had made the payload missile guidance system and a couple of other bits and pieces for them. And that was with the PhD group here. And that Echo took that up and said, literally, we're launching rockets into space or into the ionosphere and blah, 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 as papers do. And that gave me a break, because when I came back, I had 2 job offers on my desk, sort of thing. The companies had written to me, would you like a job? So it's a matter of persevering and doing things, and carry on doing what you like, and go, even if you're not getting a paid job, go and do something. My older son, he suffers from epilepsy as well, but when he was growing up and he was doing his uni, I would make him go summer holidays. He would go and do voluntary work within Southampton with some of the charities and so on. He, again, was into IT, did their sort of lists and computers and books for them and stuff, did some programs. The younger one, again, he worked at a bookshop. I mean, I never let them sort of sit around and do nothing, kick a football. They're always encouraged to do something, or go to camp, or go whatever. In the summer holidays, they would always go to one of the camps and so on for a few weeks. They were always doing something that would keep them busy and learning things. And I think most of the kids nowadays growing up, they've got to learn that they've got to keep doing something, and have, when they go to a prospective employer, they can show, at least I've done this. It doesn't matter, it's got nothing to do with the job that you're going to apply for, but it shows the capacity of doing things and learning things, especially new things. And that makes a big difference to an employer, that capacity to be able to do things and learn things and pick up things. It's very well having a degree, but that's where your job starts. The degree just shows that you have the capacity to do that much learning or whatever. After that, when you go to your job, you may never use anything you've done at university ever again. But that degree shows that you had the capacity, you've picked up the job, yes, I'm going to employ you. And you've got to keep putting that effort in to do that, to show that you're worth it. And never give in on yourself, because you're unique. No matter what anybody says, every person is different, every kid is different. They always have something unique about them that they can pick out, they can write about, they can go in, and they will get that dream or whatever they want to go for. It is possible. Us growing up, different country, different everything, nothing at all. Whatever we wanted to do, now we're okay. I mean, we've done it, my kids have done it. It is possible, and you will do it as long as you persevere. But you've got to put the effort in, and you've got to show the employees you're putting the effort in, or start your own business. This is briefly touching on the amount of life and the amount of things we've done, as I say. Just growing up in UK, it's been a brilliant thing. You're asking the rest, do you feel you're British or you're Indian or whatever? I would say, as a person, I feel British. Simple as that. I speak in English, I think in English in that sense, and I'm looking around. In that sort of sense, I feel British, but I'm of Indian origin, so I still have my Indian roots and my culture. We still celebrate all the functions. I've taught my kids to speak Hindi and so on to start with, right from kids, right from a young age. We speak to them. I've got a grandson now. He speaks Hindi. He's 5 years old. It's to teach that, make sure, not just Hindi, as many languages you can. He speaks French as well, so, I keep teaching him. That capacity that a child has is good there. But as far as I'm concerned, my way of thinking, my life, the way I've grown up, is much more British than it is Indian in that sense. A lot of the newer community coming in, and literally the community has blossomed and grown so much in Southampton. It's I don't know everybody that's here now at all. I wouldn't have a clue. And my wife as well. She's worked within the community, and she works with the local council. And they used to have an advice centre here in Southampton where they would do any type of advice. It's a bit like the citizen advice. She was manager of that for 15, 16 years, and she'd been with the council like 40 years. So she knows a lot of people in the community. I know, because we've grown up and worked here, a lot of people in the community. And there are differences. I mean, people coming in now, if you talk to me and I'm talking to people, my friends, my British friends, and I could talk to them literally in the room, and some of my Indian friends don't even know what I'm talking about. Literally, it just goes over, And that's the thing. So I can't say I'm totally Indian, and I can't say I'm totally British. But I feel British, I would say, in that sense, 100%, because that's where I've grown up and that's where I am. But I like travelling. I like other countries. I do travel a lot. And the older I get, now retired, I spent 3 months in Thailand because it's a lot warmer this year, for example. I don't like the cold weather anymore. Whereas one time I used to love it. When I did the project with Southampton University, I actually got to go to Norway, and I was in Norway for 3 months. Minus 25 and we're standing in shirt sleeves. Lovely out there. During the day the sun is shining and it's just right. I think the amount we've experienced in our lifetime, I think you could make a whole documentary on one person, really.